Good afternoon, Robert Scribbler. It is June 26, 2018. Welcome to another segment of our Global Climate and Clean Energy Analysis. Now, for this portion, what I'm going to do is talk a bit about a recurring trend of severe wildfires for Northern California. Over the past few years, we have seen very severe wildfires threaten and destroy homes and various other structures throughout Northern California, and 2018 is no exception, with a recent fire, the Pawnee Fire, burning thousands of acres across Northern California, destroying 22 structures or more, and forcing more than 3,000 people to flee. I'm going to take a brief look at the satellite shot of these fires as they appeared on June 25th in the most recent satellite shot. And so we see a complex of fires burning in Pawnee County in Northern California, as well as a number of other fires burning throughout the region. One small hotspot near the border with Oregon, and a number of fires burning throughout the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Now, these fires are, as we mentioned before, one instance of a number of instances that have occurred recently in this region. And according to a recent report in Time, in 2015, a series of fires destroyed 2,000 buildings and killed 4 people in this region of Northern California. The following year, an arsonist started a fire that wiped out 300 buildings. And last year, the county was among those ravaged by a string of fires that ripped through Northern California wine country, destroying hundreds of buildings and forcing thousands to evacuate. People in the region are notably overwhelmed. We have a statement from one Terry Gonzalez, who states that the whole community is near the breaking point. And what I've got to say is that, unfortunately, due to human-caused climate change, conditions are changing in California and the U.S. West, which are contributing to a much greater risk of wildfires. And these conditions include increasing temperatures in the region, which are increasing the rate of evaporation, which causes vegetation to dry out at a more rapid rate and generates increased drought risk. But also, increasing temperatures are increasing atmospheric moisture loading, which is resulting in precipitation falling at heavier rates when it does fall. So what you end up in California, and particularly in the West, is a situation where you have periods of heavy precipitation and periods of more intense, more extreme temperature on the hot side and more extreme drought. And so when there is heavy precipitation, vegetation tends to grow more rapidly, and as temperatures warm and conditions move toward the drought phase in a hard swing, this generates fuel for fires that rapidly dry out. And this year, I'm going to show you what some of the trends were. Now, during March, precipitation across California, and particularly Northern California, was heavier than average. And so we saw a period in which there were some rather severe storms, heavy inundation, and these intense precipitation events resulted in large vegetative growths at the time. So if you're looking at this map, The region of light green shows above average precipitation, and the region of darker green shows much above average precipitation, with record wettest conditions occurring in the darkest green sections. And as you can see, for Northern California, during March, precipitation was quite heavy. Now, moving on to temperature, we find that during this time, temperatures were cooler than average for Northern California, but come May and June, what we saw was a swing to much warmer than normal conditions for this region. And so we saw above average temperatures and much above average temperatures. And for the US as a whole, May was the record hottest May on record. And as we entered June, these warm conditions intensified for Northern California. And in addition, we saw drier than normal conditions for most of the region in May and into June. And so we saw a hard swing from wet and cool conditions, very wet and somewhat cool conditions, to much warmer than normal conditions and drier than normal conditions. And it's that hard swing that generates a higher risk of wildfires. And that's a condition that's related to human-caused climate change, and it's one that is becoming more and more prevalent for California. Now, overall, nationally, at the national level, we are seeing some rather intense outbreaks of wildfires across the country, including those in California. And presently for 2018, we are experiencing the third most intense fire season on record out of the last 10 years, and the last 10 years include some of the most intense fire seasons on record. And as I said before, the instance of severe fires, of large fires, of fires that threaten communities is increasing, particularly throughout the West, and this is a climate change related signal. So when you see headlines like this, you should understand that such events are not occurring in isolation. Climate change related trends are producing worse fire conditions, and unless we transition away from burning fossil fuels and to a renewable energy net carbon negative or net carbon zero global economy, then these conditions will continue to worsen for the foreseeable future. And so our sympathy goes out for the victims, and we should do everything we can to repair and help the communities there. But if we're going to help the communities on a long-term basis, we need to look at global carbon emissions from the standpoint of a global community. And that's really the only way ultimately we're going to help the victims, and we're going to help ourselves.